Welcome everyone to the 5th Africa Regulatory Conference. We are very happy to see so many participants joining us for the last day of our virtual event. Digitalization and regulatory agilities were the main focus of yesterday's discussion, and for today, we would like to dedicate the 3 upcoming hours to address the question, how do patients benefit from stronger regulatory systems? First, we will hear a patient perspective on regulatory system and how they are engaging in regulatory activities. Then experts will discuss the development of and challenges enhancing a sustainable business environment for the biopharmaceutical industry. And last but not least, in our final session focusing on the Africa Medicine Agency, our speakers and panelists will discuss how countries and regions are preparing to integrate efficiently the new regulatory ecosystem. Before I hand over to my colleague Paloma Tejada, who will be moderating the fireside chat session with patients, I would like to share with you these few housekeeping details. The Africa Regulatory Conference will be held in English with simultaneous interpretation services in French and Portuguese. And you will see at the end, at the bottom of your screen, a little globe where you can easily change the channel to listen either the conference in French or Portuguese if it's better for you and for your needs. And all participants are being muted to ensure good sound quality. So we really encourage you to use the Q&A toolbox that is located also at the bottom of your screen to raise any question that you may have for speakers and panelists. And please note that there is also an option to vote for a question that was already posted. So we would like to encourage you to use also this function. As you might have noted, during the previous days of the conference, we are using Mentimeter as a tool to engage with the audience. We really value your input and invite you to actively use this tool to engage with us during the session. And as a final point, the conference is being recorded. All presentations and videos will be made available on the Africa Regulatory Conference website following the conference. And you could also find on the website the bios and photos of all our speakers and panelists participating to the conference this week. So I wish you all an excellent conference. And without further delay, I would like to pass over to my colleague, Paloma Tejada. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Hello, everyone. My name is Paloma Tejada. I'm Associate Director, Alliance Building at the IFPMA. And I've been working with patient groups for the last 15 years. So it's an absolute pleasure for me to be moderating this fireside chat with patients themselves, why a strong regulatory system is important for patients, and how are African patient advocates engaging in regulatory and health system strengthening. So in order to go on with the session, I would like to introduce you to my panelists. Here with me in this room in Geneva is Alex Adoucey. He's the Executive Director of Women's Hope Foundation Ghana. And he's here in Switzerland with me because he's just attended a very important conference on patient safety organized by the World Health Organization. So thank you, Alex, for being here today. And my other panelist is actually joining us from Uganda. Her name is Flavia Kyomukama. Uganda. So welcome to the two of you. Thank you for giving us of your time and sharing your insights with us on this fireside session with patients. I do have to say that unfortunately we did have a third panelist with whom we've been talking quite a bit in the last few weeks preparing for this session, Ruth Nakanja, also from Uganda. She's a person living with sickle cell disease. Unfortunately, she was not able at the last minute to join us, but I'm sure we'll find other opportunities to talk to her. Okay, so moving swiftly along, we do not have too much time, and I do want to ask these questions to both of you. I would like to start with you, Flavia. And before I ask the question, I would like to also highlight that Flavia is a person living with HIV herself, and she's also a cervical cancer survivor. So She knows what she's talking about. She has experienced disease herself. She represents the patient organizations on the Uganda Global Fund Country Coordination Mechanism, and also sits in various committees of the Ministry of Health of her country. And very importantly for this session, she has also participated in community-led pharmacovigilance and directs patients with adverse medicine events to specialized services in her country. So thank you, Flavia, for being with us today. My first question is regarding a report that you know well. It's the Council for International Organizations of Medical Sciences, CIOM's report. It's a report that they came out last year called Patient Involvement in the Development, Regulation, and Safe Use of Medicines. And a key finding of this very important report is that patient involvement is needed in planning, testing, reviewing, approving, and monitoring treatments throughout the life cycle of medicines. That is a key finding of this report. And I know you're very familiar with this report. Actually, one of the workshops for this report was organized in Uganda, in your country. So do you agree with this, Flavia, and why?
Yes, I participated in the development of the CIOMs last year, and the report came out and was emphasizing the importance of patients in the processes of developing medications, in the processes of developing guidelines for medications. So it also emphasized the importance of participation in national drug administration or governance processes.
So Alex, we know you're a patient safety champion in your own country, and you've been very involved in these issues with the WHO. Are there any best practices that patients are co-developing with health authorities at the international level?
Thank you, Paloma. Yes, as a patient safety champion and advocate and a member of the Global Patient for Patient Safety Network, I had the opportunity and was invited to become a member of the Guideline Development Group, what is the DDG, for the new World Health Organization, guidelines on the prevention of bloodstream infections and then other associated intravascular catheters, that is the IVs. So I think my role as a patient representative in the group is very essential for maybe the development of the guidelines, because during the guidelines development, I was able to maybe, bring in the patient perspective. I contributed a lot. And then the patient aspect was also captured in the guidelines development. So the prevention of the infection is the object of, what we call important resolution and targets decided by the World Health Organization member states, where regulatory resolution, WHO resolution 70 point something is improving the prevention, diagnosis, and clinical management of the sepsis, and also sustainable development goals, which is the goal 3 and then the 2. Also, percentage of the bloodstream infection due to selected antimicrobial resistant organisms. So the guidelines development based on the systematic review of the published scientific evidence related, all issue factors for the infection associated with the insertion, maintenance, usage, and the removal of the IVs, and also the best method to prevent them. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. So that's very interesting how you've been involved in those guidelines. And maybe it's a good time to remind everyone that Patient Safety Day is coming up very soon. It's on the 17th of September.
If possible, I can talk, the patient safety, day which is coming on the Sunday. So the World Health Organization Patient Safety Day, organized by the World Health Organization, set to take place on coming Sunday, 17th September 2023. And then this year's theme for the World Health Patients Day is to engage patients for patient safety, for patient safety. So for decades, patient safety investigation and report have highlighted failures to listen to maybe patients and also care when harm occurred. So World Health Organization, have dedicated this day to, celebrate and then also come out with topics to be able to engage patients and the whole world to celebrate patient safety. So this year is coming on the Sunday, coming Sunday, September 2023. So that is for this year, patient celebration, patient safety celebration. So I repeat, the theme again is engaging patients for patient safety. That is the theme for this year Patient Safety Day.
Thank you, Alex. Thanks for that. I know you're doing a lot of work in that area in your country. Are you also involved in regulatory discussions in your own country? We know the FDA Ghana has maturity level 3 and is quite well established. Are they engaging with patients in your country as well?
Yes, they do engage with patients because with the Ministry of Health and Ghana Health Service, because they have a sector called Food and Drugs Board, like you rightly said. So within their engagement, they involve a lot of patients and then also, build their capacity to be able to maybe engage. So a lot of patients are involved in their, activities. So I also happen to have the opportunity to be able to engage with them. So within our local, sector and national also, we engage with this sector.
Do you feel that there's more that can be done? And how would you recommend that patients are more engaged with the regulatory authority?
Yes. Within the Africa continent and Ghana to be specific, there should be more engagement. They should engage patients because the engagement is not all that adequate, because they should engage patients adequately to build their capacity to be able to understand the system, because we are the consumers and we need to understand the system. So the system is also, is there, and then it's for the experts to be able to engage the patient so that the patient will bring in their perspective, their input to be able to make the healthcare safety, because there are a lot of fake medicine that is coming on board in Africa. So within the African continent, we need a system that will help. And then when the patient is also involved, it will help, the system to, it will help the system to come out with the objectives.
Yes, you touched on something very important, which is the scourge of substandard and falsified medicines in Africa. And of course, that is directly related to regulatory system strengthening. So very good point there. I hear that Flavia is back online. We cannot see her. That's okay. Don't put your camera on, Flavia, because that might help to hear you better. So going back to the original question, Flavia, on the CIOMS reports, can you tell us if you agree with their key finding and why?
Yes, thank you very much for this opportunity again. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so I concur with the findings of the CIOMS, because indeed patients understand how the medication works in their bodies, how it affects them, and how to even feel the side effects that happen to them. So therefore, it's important, and I concur with the CIOMS report, that patients and patients' organizations are part and parcel of all the processes from inception of developing of drugs in research. From the moment they start taking the medication, they need to be on committees of those organizations or centers of excellence providing the medications. They need to be part of the national drug governance systems, because the expert advice that we have, the expertise we have as patients, as people who take drugs on a daily, as people who interface with the health facilities on a daily, as people who interface with side effects on a daily, as people who see adverse effects in our communities, as people who support others to go to health centers to get treatment and even be buddies of patients, we need to be part and parcel of these processes. So we need to be part of the entire spectrum of national drugs. or international drug development right in the facility, community, facility, national, international levels, and we are looking forward to being part of, or if they are already there, part of all the Africa medicines agencies and governing bodies, so that we are well represented. We can share what goes on in our lives when we take treatment, what happens when we participate in researches, and we need to ensure that patients have the information before they engage in these researches, before they start taking the treatment, and they are able to report on side effects as soon as possible, and that whatever we report is dealt with immediately and urgently. So the COMS is merely a guiding document, but we feel that it should be operationalized at all levels, at country level, at facility level, at community level, so that whenever patients take medications, they are able to appreciate that it is doing good in giving them healthier outcomes, or if it has side effects, they have systems and processes to seek redress and to seek change in the treatment they are getting. And we have had a number of, in this process, it's not like governments are not doing it. We have had several representatives in this country. We have had Regina Kamoga, who has been on the engaging the National Drug Authority, and Dennis, I forget his other name. Dennis, who has been on the national pharmaceutical technical working group in the Ministry of Health, who have been representing us. But of course, these committees are full of maybe other stakeholders, especially Ministry of Health. We need a little bit more representation. And our call to action is to ensure that we have more representation at all levels, starting with facilities on the governing bodies, going to the districts, going to the national, going to the regional, and even the global. And I think on the global, we have had several of us participating in global discussions and development of guidelines. And we feel it's a way to go to ensure that patients and patients' organizations are ably represented and provided with the skills and professionalism that is required, because as we know how the medications work, but we also want to be supported, our capacity is built to ensure that we engage in scientific committees, we are able to speak the community scientific language to ensure that drugs work well for the people or for the patients that we work with, or for us as individual patients who are living with diseases. Back to you.
Thank you,
I hope I was being heard.
Yes, we could hear you perfectly well. And yeah, and thanks for sharing those insights. I know that in Uganda, patients are very mobilized, and you have interactions with the Ministry of Health, but also with your FDA, right? With your National Regulatory Authority. So what you were saying is two of the members of the Uganda Alliance of Patient Organizations that you belong to are sitting in the National Pharmaceutical Technical Working Group in your National Drug Authority.
The Ministry of Health and
your Ministry of Health,
Drug Authority.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so my question would be, what is your interaction with the Drug Authority in Uganda?
Our interactions through Regina and through Dennis is that the ministry and the members of these governing bodies are really willing to listen to us, and also to see how we can gainfully participate and inform many of these guidelines, whatever they are implementing. And I do recall the last meeting we had, we were discussing pharmacovigilance, which is community-led, because there are cases where the reports don't reach NDA very fast, but we can do it. We can have like a toll-free or a contact person that we can tell if we are seeing very adverse effects, and we are able to get redress or even action as fast as possible. And recently we had a case in which we have found chicken and pigs having ARVs and antibiotics in their muscles, and so we've been talking to the NDA to ensure that this doesn't go on. But we are also talking to the national drug shops and pharmaceutical organizations to ensure that we don't have drug resistance, and ensure that we are at the table to inform where we see such cases. And I think it is our role as communities to monitor and also report such cases where drugs are being sold for animal use instead of people. And so we were thinking and looking at means and ways of ensuring that reporting happens swiftly, and that NDA is able to act also as fast to see how to minimize this kind of action. But we also work with our various health facilities to inform them about adverse effects. We have colleagues who have adverse effects, and maybe one facility doesn't appreciate the adverse effects. So we refer, as communities, when we see some of these adverse effects among our people, like those who have been disabled. Of course, like when as PLHIV, people think that when your CD4 and your viral load are good, then it's okay. But we have seen people getting maimed who have had osteoporosis, and people continue to say, after all, your viral load, but people are getting disabled. So we have reported this, and we have encouraged a number of our colleagues to go and change facilities to get services. Because of course, the government system takes long, and it is a little bit slow. There is a lot of bureaucracy. But where we can try to use our means and our contacts, we report and we ensure that patients get the services, and they are taken off these drugs that are causing adverse effects. We, as much as possible, report, we educate, we encourage. Like last year around patient safety, we were discussing issues of polypharmacy, and we are saying if you are a patient, you have pressure, you have HIV, you have cancer, we need to see how to continuously inform our health providers about the various medications that we are taking. So this one cannot come from NDA or from the Pharmaceutical Association of the Ministry. They could share guidelines or information, but it is us, the communities, who are going to be talking to our fellow colleagues that please make sure that you access the health facility. But as you access the health facility, ensure that whenever you have any other drug you are taking, ensure that the doctor is aware, because we know the drug interaction causes also some adverse effects. So we share this, but we also inform the government that this is the way we need to go, because we have so many chronic diseases, and people have multi or intersecting diseases, and therefore are taking various diseases that really require that people are cautious and they are informed, and they are able to see the adverse effects coming out of the use of the various medications.
Yes, so thank you, Flavia.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I have to cut you off because we're running out of time.
Okay, so I was thinking I had more time, but thank you.
Thanks for sharing those real examples from real life. And for mentioning patient-reported outcomes and the role of patients in pharmacovigilance, which of course is extremely important. So thank you very much. I would like just to give the last 2 minutes to Alex here with me to tell us in one word, what is the main barrier to patient involvement in regulatory processes?
Thank you very much, once again. I mean, the key or the main challenge is patient understanding, and then capacity to be able to maybe engage in the regulatory processes. So I would love it. I would appreciate it very much if the regulatory system will engage patients and all their job to be able to maybe improve the system. Because when like my colleague rightly said, engaging patients is something very important. So building the patient capacities is one of the things that will pave the way for the system to operate very well. Because if you really want to have quality medicines, pharmaceutical products and other things, patient engagement is the key, because we are the consumers. So when the product is coming in, we need patient understanding on from that end. So patient capacity building is also very important. So I would suggest if this big platform organization will be able to maybe, because in our countries, Like for instance, Ghana, we have the Ministry of Health, and then we have Ghana Health Services. They are the government, mandate, institutions to be able to administer this. So whereby the advocates, like we the patients, we need to maybe see Africa, region, something like a network to be able to maybe train patients, to engage patients, so that it will help to maybe strengthen, the healthcare system. I think capacity building is a key for we, the patient, safety advocates, to be able to engage and then understand your process. Thank you.
Excellent. Final words on capacity building and the importance of capacity building for patients to be more meaningfully engaged in regulatory affairs. So thank you so much, Alex and Flavia. Thank you for that. And we're right at the end of the 30 minutes that was allotted to this fireside chat. So I want to just thank both of you and congratulate you for all the good work that you're doing on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you for this great opportunity.
Thank you for organizing, and we'll catch up. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Flavia. Bye-bye.
Well, good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, wherever you are on the planet. So I'm welcoming you now to our track 7, which is the Africa New Public Health Order, creating a sustainable ecosystem for the biopharmaceutical industry. And just to say that there will not be a break after this session, we'll go straight on to track 8. Now, the objectives of this track are to look at the importance of regulatory structures to promote sustainable business environment for the biopharmaceutical industry. We want to review recent developments and challenges which will enhance the sustainable business models on the continent for both international and local players. We want to highlight also the importance and look at the interrelationship between the regional economic environments committees and regulatory initiatives along those of the continental initiatives, particularly the African Medicines Agency, but also looking, for example, at the future of the African Free Trade Area. And we want to understand that link between local and regional registration and procurement, national registration and procurement, and continental registration and possibly procurement. Now, as IFPMA, we are delighted to be hosting this platform for an interactive discussion between a wide range of stakeholders involved in this area, both from the private sector, local and international, and also from government. Now, as IFPMA, we've been involved and engaged in this topic for well over the past 2 years. And we are committed to finding potential solutions and initiatives for sustainable long-term local production and the creation of the ecosystem for sustainable business on the continent. In November 21, we made a joint declaration with the European Commission together with FPA and Vaccines Europe, where we wanted to work with the Commission and African stakeholders to look at sustainable initiatives, potential sustainable initiatives. And in 2022, at the African European Business Forum and Summit, we issued a business declaration with colleagues from the local industries, outlining a series of initiatives that we believe were key for long-term sustainable local production and a business environment on the continent for the pharmaceutical industry. Those included a number of initiatives around affordable access or access to affordable financing, to trade, to skills, to governance. But a key area of that was regulatory strengthening and the future of the AMA. Our moderator for today is Zainab Aziz, and she will be moderating the panel discussion and the questions and answers session. But now I am delighted to introduce Akona Tishangela of the African CDC. She's the program coordinator of the Partnership for African Vaccine Manufacturing, known as the PAVM, and she will be presenting on setting the scene for local manufacturing of health products, needs, challenges, and solutions. Akona, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Greg, and thank you really for the opportunity and inviting Africa CDC to present on this platform around really how to setting the scene for local manufacturing of health products, needs, challenges, and solutions. And so I think we can jump onto the first slide so I can get started. Really great conversations during the fireside discussions and really hearing the perspective from the patient level or the community ground level. It really helped us to really think and redirect how we find the solutions to these key problems on the continent. So we really know the current reality in Africa in terms of the pharmaceutical manufacturing. We have currently less than 40% of therapeutics being manufactured on the continent, and even less if you're looking at vaccines or other health products. And therefore, there is a key need to ensure expansion of manufacturing on the continent, as well as to ensure that the continent itself is self-reliant and sufficient to be able to meet the health security of Africa, but as well as of the world. And so COVID-19 pandemic really highlighted the challenge of vaccine national protectionism and delayed access in Africa, highlighting the need for us to really be able to fight for their health security on the continent. Next slide, please. We also know that health product manufacturing and innovation provides a sizable opportunity on the African continent, and investments in manufacturing on the continent deliver both social as well as economic benefits for the continent. It really ensures that as institutions as ourselves, as Africa CDC, can ensure the continent improves its capacity for pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response by improving the public health access and affordability, while also facilitating economic growth as well as job creation. Next slide, please. African CDC's overall strategy is really based on our 5 key pillars that should ensure that public health systems on the continent are strengthened. We have the right workforce to quickly respond to the public health threats, to ensure that there's increased domestic resources and funding to health security, as well as having respectful, action-oriented partnerships. But most importantly for this meeting, really, when we saw the challenges that we had, not just because of COVID, but because of past and history, looking at HIV, looking at various life-saving medicines taking years to actually reach the African population, then there was a call to really have an expansion of manufacturing of health products and biotechnology on the continent to ensure that we democratize access to life-saving medicines and equipment. So we've just recently also launched a new strategic plan for the next 5 years, whereas expansion of local manufacturing is a pillar with a set of the key goals to ensure that we can actually meet the 60% of health products required in Africa by 2040 to be produced within the continent itself. And we have a mission around that to promote health security and self-reliance in Africa by increasing its ability to develop, manufacture, and trade essential health products that prevent, diagnose, alleviate, and cure local medical needs. And so within that our overall strategic priorities really is to ensure that we have a healthy market within the manufacturing space, strengthen local R&D ecosystem. As we've seen, less than 2% of R&D is actually conducted on the continent, as well as incubate and scale up the necessary infrastructure, as well as the workforce of the local manufacturing, as well as supply chain. Next slide, please. And so based on the various framework for action, PAVM is on a multi-stage journey, as realized by the new public health order, which I mentioned earlier. And so over the next 2 years, really, we are focusing on driving implementation of the strategy, including operationalizing the secretariat itself and implementing and scaling the various board programs, access to finance, regulatory strengthening, workforce development, R&D, and the likes, as well as ensuring that we extend the focus of discussion to other adjacent products. So therapeutics and diagnostics, in addition to the current conversation of vaccines. Next slide, please. So based on this strategic priorities that we are now drawing from our strategic plan, as well as the bold programs from the Framework for Action, PAVM has really seen a huge positive shift in the ecosystem within Africa through various partnerships as well as within the Africa CDC. We have a lot to celebrate as a continent as we see shifts across the overall vaccine ecosystem. Some of these key milestones, I think we've mentioned before, you've seen a number of initiatives being put into local manufacturing on the continent, over 30. You've seen a number of donor support, seeing 1.5 billion also even more being put into or invested into the continent, as well as the movement towards the operationalization of AMA, which I'm sure we'll hear more about, and its office being identified in Rwanda. Within the regulatory space, we've seen 3 AU countries move into MO3 status, as well as us as Africa CDC providing direct support within some of these NRAs to provide equipment, capacity building, as well as operational costs. And so if I was to close, looking at the time, if you go to the next slide, please. Although we are moving towards the 60% of vaccines manufactured on the continent, there's still some work that needs to be done. And so we really went back in June and really looked at some of the short-term milestones that are needed to be achieved across the ecosystem to work towards the 2040 ambition. We definitely need to ramp up the number of doses being produced on the continent. For us to be able to actually reach the 2040 goal, we should be producing about 237 million doses per annum. We need the right facilitating instruments, such as setting up a pool procurement mechanism, having a legal instrument that actually acts as a vehicle for that pool procurement mechanism, as well as supporting facilitation and having the right financial instruments to support these. That is really key to really help with the overall ecosystem consolidation of demand, as well as of the necessary supply, to also enable regional regulatory harmonization within the continent. We also need to ensure, as I talk about regulatory harmonization, we strengthen regulatory harmonization by really building the right capacities on the continent by operationalizing the regional centers of regulatory excellence to support the other NRAs to also be able to reach the necessary status level based on WHO benchmarks to be able to really be able to reach and respond and support our manufacturers on the continent. We also need to increase the number of projects that involve more upstream processes to ensure the necessary sustainability of manufacturing on the continent, as well as increase the skilled talents by at least building the right cadre in the ecosystem by actually adding about 1,000 full-time employees per year. Currently, we are sitting on about 2,000 to 3,000 full-time employees in biomanufacturing space. We need to ramp that up to about 12,000 to 14,500 to be able to reach the 2040 goal, as well as in the short term, mobilize the needed resources. I think previously PAVM showed that this overall program or project really requires initiative. Actually, it's not a program. Initiative requires about 30 billion of investments for us to be able to reach this goal. And so in the short term, just looking at already the investment that has actually come into the continent, we need about 2 billion at least for the next 1 to 2 or 3 years. And so finally, to expand the focus not only to from vaccines to broader health products, what I can say is that these investments will only be successful by really ensuring that the health products that we produce on the continent are safe and of good quality standards for the health security of the continent. And having these kinds of discussions and conversations, bringing in the regulatory space within Africa, I think are key to help us really to start moving the needle further to reach the 60% that we've set for ourselves. So thank you very much. And I hope I've been able to set the scene for the next set of discussions during the panel discussion.
Thank you so much, Akona. Indeed, you have set the scene and provided, some great background to our panel discussion. So, hello everyone. As introduced by Greg, I am Zainab Aziz. I am employed by Novartis, and I will be representing IFPMA in this panel discussion. As mentioned by Greg as well, we are joined today by a very diverse and distinguished panel of speakers. And I would like to introduce to you Mr. Patrick Tipo from AVIM, Dr. John Mwangi from IFPMA CAPI, Mrs. Khadija Ade Aboladi from NAFDAC, Ms. Kirti Nasai from University of Cape Town, Dr. Susan Winks from the H3D Foundation, and Dr. Sylvia Vito from Eva Pharma. And these speakers will be joining us in the panel discussion together with Akona, who you have just heard from. For more information on the panelists, you are welcome to, look at the event homepage that has been posted in the chat for their biographies. And I'd like to get started on this very interesting and important discussion by inviting Mr. Patrick Tipo to tell us more about the key opportunities and challenges that are faced by local African companies in the context of manufacturing within the region.
Thank you very much, Zainab, and thanks from the African Vaccine Manufacturing Initiative to be contributing to this panel discussion. I think Akona has laid an excellent foundation in terms of providing an overview of where we are in Africa and the progress that we've also made. But I think what we are left with, if you've missed it, let me emphasize it, is that we still have a distance to go. So, and for that, I think we need to get very, very organized in terms of pushing forward off this great start. And why do I say that there's a great start? Is because we already have something on the ground. We have achieved much over the last 3 years in terms of ramping that up. And so I think what I'd like to deliver as my first point is that we need to build on this portfolio of success that we've had and ensure that that group of companies and countries that has taken us forward is expanded over time. We need to, I think there's an opportunity that we can leverage in terms of working with those front runners to accelerate progress, and then also work with the next circle of companies and countries to expand their group. So I think the expansion of demonstrated success is going to be critically important to catalyze this going forward. I think one of the other things that I want to emphasize is that there is an opportunity for us collectively now to shift the center of gravity on the start of drug product manufacturing, but also into drug substance manufacturing, and then further into product development, because that is the core which is going to shift this dependency that we currently have. I'm aware of time, so let me make one more point, and that is it's the market. The market is really going to be the needle shifter in terms of whether we can go the distance and sustain that which we are establishing. Thank you very much, Zainab.
Thanks, Mr. Tipo. You've raised some good points, and I think sustainability is quite an important factor, as you mentioned. So, shifting now to an innovative industry perspective, John, are you able to elaborate on some of the key opportunities and challenges for the industry?
Thank you, Zainab, and everyone. There is certainly some opportunities, especially coming from the perspective of innovative industry. The first thing actually is in the partnerships. We see, for instance, the coexistence of global, regional, and local manufacturers. has actually provided some good synergies that we see could trigger further development of pharmaceutical production in general. And there is certainly then the need to keep cultivating this, and it should go beyond not only the topics of tech transfer, but we should also be looking at voluntary licensing where feasible. The other one, which has also been a big focus for this conference, is about regulatory harmonization. The last decade has seen a lot of movement in this, and I think we can all be proud of what this continent has achieved as far as harmonizing regulatory requirements, something which was almost looking like a dream before. What this has done is that it has provided us with alternative regulatory pathways, which also helps, including local manufacturers, to get to the market faster. And sometimes now we do not also necessarily need to wait for special treatment from the home countries, because these opportunities and alternatives are already existing. Of course, there are some enablers that we should really carry along with, such as use of reliance practices, which we can harness, especially between the regional economic communities, and hopefully also within the context of AMA. The next thing also to consider is also what we have seen in the past, a lot of fragmentation of the region and the local production industry with a lot of Me Too kind of products. With these harmonized requirements and with coming of free movement of goods, as we'll hear from other colleagues later, we see an opportunity to consolidate the market and make it more viable for production and for the continent. Then there is also another opportunity for those global producers who would like to localize some of the products to the continent for whatever reason. What we need, however, to do there is that we need to come up with a proper framework that guides global producers, local producers, regional producers who want to transition from global sites, for instance, to local and regional hubs. And we need to do that in a very consultative way. Another point to also drive home is concerning the need to identify, of course, the competitive edge that the continent has. I do believe, and I think it's a fact that local production in itself is not a solution if we are only doing it for the sake of doing it. What is needed, of course, is to find the right priorities and make smart interventions where they are needed. And we can only do that by looking at where we have a competitive edge, where we have the needs in the market, and prioritize accordingly also the investments. Finally, so that because of time, is also we need to look beyond regulatory. I know this has been a conference about regulatory, and we have done a lot of work the last 10 years, but we also need to have the conversation around the other market shaping issues, such as taxation and pricing of pharmaceutical products, as that would also support the wider ecosystem if we were thinking about local production. So I want to stop there for the time being. Back to you, Zainab.
Thank you, John. I think you've touched on, many very key issues. I'll move now to Mrs. Khadija. Will you be able to tell us from a regulatory authority perspective, how can local manufacturing be more attractive at the national and regional levels? And if you can maybe provide some examples of how this is applied in Nigeria as well, it would be great.
Okay, thank you very much for having me. It's been very nice. The discussions have been very engaging. From the regulatory perspective, more specifically as regards Nigeria, we've recorded some level of success by deploying some strategies, especially based on lessons learned from the COVID-19 pandemic. In terms of attracting investments, or in terms of attracting people or organizations into local manufacturing, the first thing that I think should be on ground is to have industry-specific policies, because these play a vital role in the progress and survival of any industry. In Nigeria, especially because of the challenges we experienced during the COVID-19 pandemic, we couldn't get of course, we couldn't get vaccines. We couldn't even get our normal pharmaceuticals because of the import dependency. So the need to actually deploy industry-specific policies that would aid the establishment of appropriate and sustainable structures to achieve local production became very important. And that is one area that needs to be looked at to make local manufacturing attractive, either at the national or regional level. There must be the policy backing that will give strategic direction, to ensure that people know what they're getting into and what's the need for them, the kind of support they will be getting to ensure sustainability of the investments. Another thing that was done by the Nigerian government during the pandemic to support local manufacturing was the provision of some credit support. It was an intervention by the federal government through the Central Bank of Nigeria, for the healthcare industry. This was deployed as part of measures to cushion the effects of the pandemic. And that intervention actually cut across several sectors of the healthcare system, majorly the pharmaceutical manufacturing industry were able to get funds, long-tenured loans that they were able to use to improve their manufacturing capacity, to enable them comply with regulatory standards, to ensure quality of products manufactured, and several other benefits that accrued from that support. Again, there was also the intervention on efforts to accelerate development of research into vaccines, especially vaccines of public health interest. This was done by identifying certain organizations, research institutions, manufacturing organizations, and universities, the academia, to harness their strengths in the development of vaccines that actually meet our own public health needs. So that led to the development of or establishment of the Vaccine Development Consortium at the time, which helps to look into development of vaccines that will meet our immediate public health needs. And a lot of work has been done by that consortium because the strengths of the different organizations were brought together to help in that effort. Another policy that we have in Nigeria that is making local manufacturing attractive at this point is that being an import-dependent country and having learned our lessons from the COVID-19 pandemic, we came up with what is called the 5+5 policy. This policy had actually been on ground before, but full implementation now came to bear after the pandemic. This is a policy that we use to ensure that after 2 rounds of registration cycles of imported medicines, once we're able to establish that there is local capacity to manufacture those medicines, the market authorization holders have to put in place strategies to manufacture those products locally by the end of the 2nd round of the registration cycle, which is the second 5 years. This policy has attracted a lot of previously imported products into the local manufacturing industry in Nigeria through contract manufacturing arrangements and even establishment of new pharmaceutical manufacturing plants. Then we also have what we call the ceiling list. This is a list of products for which the regulatory authority decided that we have registered enough imported brands of this product. We have local capacity to manufacture this product, and as such, we will not be registering any new brands of those molecules as imported products. So this allows for the local industry, because we did a capacity utilization survey, and we know that we have vacant capacity to manufacture these products locally. So we are not registering any new brands of imported, any new products of those molecules. No new imported brands of those molecules. Only locally manufactured brands will now be used. And these really are mostly our essential medicines, which we have been able to determine that we have local manufacturing capacity to provide the needs of the country. So I would want to stop here now for want of time so that I can allow other colleagues to answer their own questions. Thank you. Over.
Thank you so much for sharing those insights, Mrs. Khadija. My next question is for Kirti. Can you please share on how you foresee the relationship between EMA and the African Continental Free Trade Area in the development of a sustainable business ecosystem?
Thank you very much, Zainab, for the question, and to IFPMA for the opportunity to participate in this conference. This is an extremely important question, especially when we think about some of the current developments. And I think that we need to think about it in terms of three areas. One is, what are the developments on the African Medicines Agency? We heard Akona also stress the importance of regulatory harmonization. What does the AFCFTA mean to the pharmaceutical sector? And what policies are in place there? As well as what are the specific requirements in the pharmaceutical sector in terms of regulation? I think we need to look at all of those three areas in context and relationship with each other to understand what are the opportunities going forward. So let me start with the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, which seeks to create the largest free trade area in the world, which will mean freedom of movement of goods, services, and people. Now, right now in the pharmaceutical sector, this is quite challenging because we have many different regulatory regimes specific to each country, and medicine legislation, which is also specific to each country. Then we also need to bring into context the Futures Report. So the Futures Report was published by the African Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat at the latter part of 2021. And in this report, the pharmaceutical and vaccine sectors are highlighted as key opportunities to drive economic growth as well as trade on the continent. So this is a very important initiative because we then see how African policymakers are prioritizing the pharmaceutical sector, specifically in terms of future development and growth. Then coming to looking at the pharmaceutical sector and what is specific to the sector. We know that the sector is highly, highly regulated, as it should be. We need to be able to protect public health, and the whole value chain is regulated in different ways. And we cannot compromise on standards or regulations because of the potentially life-threatening consequences of not regulating the sector properly. However, we also need to acknowledge that trade cannot take place without adherence to these strict regulations. So that is where the AMA becomes very, very important. Like I said, most, if not all, African countries have medicines legislation, which also include details of technical standards that companies need to adhere to. And as much progress has been made in terms of regulatory harmonization, convergence through various regional initiatives, including work sharing, joint reviews, etc., these do not circumvent the national legislation that is already in place. The national legislation is still enforced, and these can inadvertently create non-tariff barriers through country-specific standards, such as for packaging, labeling, etc., as well as the complex regulatory environment. We heard John also talk about consolidated markets, and I think that's the opportunity that the free trade agreement gives us through the formation of regional value chains. However, we are going to need both national as well as supranational reform in order to ensure alignment and transition to harmonized standards across the continent. So the benefits of the Continental Free Trade Agreement will result in increased trade and regional value chain development, but these objectives will only be realized if we have success and in regulatory harmonization as well as enforcement. So I'll stop there, Zainab, and give opportunities to the rest of the colleagues.
Thank you so much for raising those important points, Kirti. I think definitely regulatory harmonization would, assist greatly in this area. I have a next question now for Susan. Susan, currently there are a lot of basic health research, going on in Africa by organizations such as yours, the H3D Foundation. What opportunities can, this research translate into creating this sustainable local medicine production landscape in Africa we aspire to? Susan, we don't hear you. It seems that you are off mute though, so I'm not quite sure why. Okay, maybe in the interest of time, I will go to the next question and we'll come back to Susan. So my next question is for Sylvia. Um, Sylvia, can you, similarly to what Kirti elaborated on with regards to the need for regulatory harmonization on the continent, from a local manufacturer perspective, how do you also see the AMA advancing continental reach within the local manufacturing context?
Okay, cool. Thank you. Thank you very much for having me here. For us, speaking on behalf of Viva Pharma and any other local manufacturer in Africa, the role of AMA and the importance of course, WHO, AMA agencies in local manufacturing ecosystem is really critical. And I'll mention just three things. Number one, looking at it from a regulatory compliance and driving market access. These agencies are critical in assessing the manufacturing facilities that we have. They do conduct inspections. They ensure compliance to the expected high GLP standards. And of course, that increases the trust and the reliability of the quality products that we manufacture. So with setting the compliance to the global standards, this has enabled local manufacturers like Viva Pharma specifically to expand our market reach beyond our national borders. We currently manufacture, we have many sites out of Egypt, and that means with our EDA approvals and the inspection and the authorizations, we are able to expand our reach beyond Egypt, promoting the exports that we make, driving economic growth for Africa. And of course, this contributes not only to just job creation, it contributes to economic expansion, stimulates investment, and expands this whole local manufacturing ecosystem, for example. The net result is also the diversification of the sources of healthcare products that we are now able to make in Africa, for Africa, and for the world. Yeah, so this makes Africa less reliant on this external supply and supply chain, reducing our risk and exposure to disruption, ensures a more resilient, sustainable healthcare system as well. So that's one. Secondly, with the importance around WHO agencies and AMA, we are going to see strengthening of regional and global collaboration. AMA is able to help us to facilitate. Sorry, can you hear me?
Sorry, I just wanted to ask if you can please slow down. We do have, translation services, and I think they may need, to have some time to translate.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, so the second point would be around strengthening the regional and global collaboration. They are able to help us facilitate regional collaboration and knowledge sharing among African states, the exchange of best practice and regulatory experiences. So when there is increased coordination and harmonization approach in the healthcare regulation, manufacturing ecosystem gets better because it does three things. It fosters production of more healthcare products that are tailored to the specific needs of the African population. Number two, it attracts the ease of setting up more and more local manufacturing capabilities. Number three, it fosters innovation and research, product development here in Africa. Then number four, more importantly, it enhances the partnership with international organizations and multinationals to enable tech transfer and capacity building. Viva Pharma is an example we've seen in the last so long, couple of tech transfer and partnership with multinationals, where we are now manufacturing and doing DNP for Gilead Sciences, Eli Lilly, Roche, Boston Scientific, LD Collins, Reckitt Kaiser, to mention just a few. So these are some of the knock-on effects that we see. And of course, third point is that the future, that we are able as Africa to have a much more rapid response to our healthcare emergencies within the region. Yeah. So once WHO ML agencies are more and the AMA is in place, then that means that there's a swift response of the healthcare emergencies when they do happen, whether it's disease outbreaks or pandemics, because they can expedite the regulatory process for essential medicines and vaccines. They can facilitate the timely availability and deployment of drugs. It saves lives and mitigates the impact in the public health emergencies. So for me, those are the 3 points around regulatory compliance and driving market access, strengthening regional and global collaboration to bring in more tech transfer and more production, and of course, enabling rapid response to healthcare emergencies. I hope that was got. It's clear.
Thanks, Sylvia. Apologies for interrupting you. And yes, I think that's quite clear on your 3 points. Thank you. I think Eva Pharma is doing quite a lot already. Susan, I'm not sure if we can hear you now. Let us test your sound, maybe.
Can you hear me now? I've tried a different. Okay. Is it clear enough?
Sounds good.
Great. Do you want to recap on your question?
Sure. Let me go back. So, yeah, we just wanted to find out, in terms of health research going on the continent by organizations such as yours, what are some of the opportunities that can help us create this, sustainable local manufacturing landscape we seek?
Thank you, Zainab. And I also wanted to thank Akona because she really did a great job of setting the scene of why we need to do this and why it's so important. And I think from where I'm sitting upstream in the innovation value chain, I'm going to get deep into the weeds of organic chemistry and API manufacturing. We don't just need manufacturing in terms of formulation, we actually need to be doing the API synthesis on the continent as well. And then not to repeat what John said, but my first point is very much the same as his. Partnerships are absolutely key, and that's where the opportunity lies. So for us, it's partnerships both with local industry, with global industry, with government, with not-for-profits. Building up the correct partnerships to actually see these things succeed is one of the key opportunities we have on the continent. The next thing that we see as an opportunity is really for us at H3D is going ground up. We want to show, start small, start with something where you can develop the skills and you can show impact and then grow big. We don't want to get stuck in lots of talking and little action. We want to show that we can do it and demonstrate to the rest of the world, to the rest of the continent. Don't hold us back. Let's get our hands dirty and start making a difference. And that brings me to my third point, which is to give you an example of one of the projects that I'm very excited about. We've recently got funding through the USAID through a big project called the Matrix Project, which is looking at HIV prevention on the continent. And here we're coming in as an independent special project to look at what can we do to make the manufacture of ARV APIs a reality on the continent. And this is a very neat project because it touches on 4 critical things. The one is we know that if we're going to be able to do this on the continent, we have to be cost competitive. So the first thing is what can we do to make sure that whatever process we're optimizing is going to make this viable. The next thing is to make sure we have, in order to do that, we need the right technology. So we've partnered with a company in the US who make a special flow reactor system to bring in new technology to the continent that will allow us to achieve this competitive edge to do it here. And then the third component is to be able to develop the skills. So we're running this as a project at the University of Cape Town with postdoctoral research fellows to really create a process chemistry hub to optimize these synthesis. And then finally, and again, going back to partnerships, we have partnered with a local manufacturing company called CPT Pharma, who will immediately take any innovation that we have at the university and move it forward into commercialization and translation. So again, speaking to that partnership, we're able to bring in the technology we need, demonstrate it while building the skills, and then also make sure that our impact is actually going to have an effect on the patient. So I'll leave it there because I know we are short on time.
Thanks so much, Susan. Yeah. And just looking at the time, I have a question for Akona. Akona, it's sort of like it's a question tying in a little bit of what each of our panelists have already addressed. So we've heard from each of them on, some of the different opportunities and some of the different initiatives that they are busy working with in their individual, environments. What do you think, is the current efforts that are being put in place right now to drive local manufacturing on the continent? Do you think that what we're doing at the moment is actually sustainable? Are the numbers adding up? How can we make this sustainable for the future?
Yeah, thanks. Yes, I would say it's a definite yes, but then there are key areas that would be needed to really ensure that all of these efforts being put into local manufacturing are sustainable. And really, it will be primarily why we're having this meeting, regulatory harmonization, making sure that we have good quality products that meet international standards, which will allow the expansion of the African manufacturers to the rest of the world, and thereby increasing investment into the continent. And so we need to start working more and more as well. And I mean, this has been mentioned a couple of times towards R&D and innovation for end-to-end production. As I said previously, only 2% of R&D is currently conducted on the continent. And in order for us to really truly be sustainable, we need to actually start truly being able to manufacture our own products from ground zero. There are also the necessary tech transfers and international properties, really having those agreements and those relationships between our global manufacturers as well as our local manufacturers is really, really important in ensuring that we have some sustainable manufacturing on the continent. But most importantly, we really need sustainable domestic funding and commitment from our African countries themselves, by essentially starting off by preferential procurement of African products, by ensuring that we have our governments behind local manufacturing on the continent. Will definitely make sure that we have a sustainable ecosystem. Because when you ask the question whether are the numbers adding up, we have a market of over 1.5 billion, 1.6 billion people on the continent. So do we need more investment to be able to reach the goal of 2040? But then it would be a challenge, really, if we do not have the right regulated platforms. One thing that we are hearing on our side, in any case, is investments will come once we have the right regulators and regulatory harmonization on the continent. And definitely we are moving towards that. And I think once we have that set up, AMA is set up, and I'm sure we're going to hear really great positive things in the next panel. We are moving towards that direction, and definitely we are going to have a sustainable system in the future. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Akona. I think we have run out of time, but I'm going to borrow just a few minutes of Greg's time to ask one last question. So, during the course of this conference from Tuesday to today, we've heard so much about, regulatory harmonization in the context of joint assessment procedures as well. So my question is for Mrs. Khadija. I would like to ask, what do you see as the value of the joint assessment procedures in the context of local manufacturing from the industry manufacturer's perspective?
Okay, thank you very much, Zainab, for that question. Honestly, the value brought to bear by regulatory harmonization and joint assessments cannot be overemphasized, because these are tools that have been deployed to ensure that products get to market faster. We reduce it shortens the time to market, especially for new products. It also opens up new markets for manufacturers, because they're able to get their products registered in areas that are participating in regulatory harmonization efforts. It also enhances capacity of the local manufacturers to actually meet global requirements. And of course, this also helps to promote regional integration and reliance. We can't but continue to improve efforts in joint assessments, including dossier assessments, joint inspections,
Hi, I don't know whether we've lost Khadija.
Looks like it.
Seems to me that we've lost Khadija.
Uh-oh.
Oh, hi.
Hello?
We can hear you now, Khadija. Go ahead.
Oh,
Yes.
sorry. I was just talking to myself. I didn't realize that. Okay, so I was speaking about the value added by joint assessments and regulatory harmonization. And I said that we cannot but emphasize the need to continue to improve efforts in these areas, because it helps to shorten the time to market for products, especially new products. because once the assessment is done jointly, it means that the market, the manufacturer has access to all the markets that are part of that harmonization. So it opens up new markets for these manufacturers. It also helps to enhance their capacity, because in meeting such requirements, they are able to comply with regulatory requirements that apply across several borders. So it helps to open new markets for them and helps them to meet global requirements. It also helps to promote regional integration and reliance, because where we bring together regulatory officers from the different regulatory authorities, we're able to pull our strengths together, and then we rely on each other's strengths to be able to get ensure that we have products of the right quality available on the continent. So we can't but continue to improve efforts along these lines, because these collaborations have helped to improve on the quality of products. It has helped to build the capacity of the manufacturers. It has also helped to build the capacity of the regulators as well. For want of time, I would like to stop here. Thank you. Over, Zainab.
Thank you so much, Khadija. I think you've highlighted some very key important points. I'm going to go now to Q&A. I see we've got one question from Alex. Do you have any plans or strategies to engage patients in your interventions to achieve better results? So, I think the question on patients is quite key, quite a good one to bring into today's discussion, given our theme for today. So maybe if I can ask John to share some perspectives on this, engaging patients.
Yeah, thank you. There is certainly the role for the patient also in this intervention. I did say, for instance, in my intervention earlier about prioritization. And there's also a question there about, can African manufacturers also actually match, manufacturers from other regions? And I think also the thoughts also shared there by QHC is about prioritizing and looking at where the needs are. The best way to know the needs is talk to the patients and understand what really is needed. I think there is room for that, and we should certainly have this conversation with the patients also on board. Zainab.
Thanks so much, John. I don't see any other questions in the chat. Please feel free to post your questions.
So what John has said, as an R&D and manufacturing organization, one of the key things we are critical on, because we are in the era of evidence-based medicine, is also conducting wider clinical trials that have involved cohorts of African patients from the continent, because we are in the process of developing products and medicines that actually meet their local needs. So instead of relying for external data of trials of patients outside of the continent, we've got a very strong focus to ensure that R&D division would also be able to engage not only patient groups, but ensure that the clinical data has been conducted and evaluated from the continent, because that then substantiates the impact of some of the medicines and medicaments that we're producing, at least as Eva Pharma, and I'm sure many other local manufacturers would have that in consideration, because we just don't manufacture, we're actually doing R&D and clinical trials as well, because we do it all the way from API. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sylvia. And I welcome any other panelists if they'd like to contribute to answering that question as well. Okay, so then I think I would like to thank you all for taking the time to join us here today and for sharing your very valuable perspectives on this important topic. Well done, and congratulations to all of you on the great work that you are doing. And as we can see, there's evidently an abundance of opportunity with regards to local manufacturing on the African continent. And equally, the effort to achieve this is substantial, where multidisciplinary and multi-stakeholder engagement is crucial, So I will now hand over to Greg for closing remarks, and we thank you all for joining in.
Yeah, thanks very much. And I'd like to pick up actually from the very beginning what Akona said about the significant positive shift. I think the very fact that we've had this conversation today, listening to the type of issues that we've had today and the people involved is a reflection of progress, because this sort of conversation could not have taken place 2 years ago. And, as was mentioned before and during the course of the discussion, we've seen increased manufacturing capacities. We've seen an increased number of WHO maturity level 3 agencies on the continent. We've seen a significant number of ratifications and signatures for the AMA and the establishment of AMA and the establishment of the HQ now in Rwanda. We've seen a significant series of partnerships between international players and local players, and between local players, both in vaccines and treatments. We've now seen the kickoff of the African Continental Free Trade area. But as also said, there are many things still to do. We want to see the operationalization of AMA. We need to improve the skills development on the continent. We want to improve and increase the number of those partnerships. It has indicated the importance there of tech transfer and licensing agreements within the operation of AMA. It was very, very clearly expressed that it's not just about increasing access to patients, it's about increasing expertise, the ability of business to develop through stronger regulatory capacities, and also the ability for response. Around partnerships and around manufacturing is one thing, but also the increasing importance of local R&D and local innovation. And we as IFPMA are very proud to be in a partnership with the H3D Foundation, but developing the skills and the importance of innovation. Ground zero, I think the term was used, to go to ground zero and move upwards is very important. Other issues of great importance: tax, trade. We see the potential of the Africa Free Trade Area, but as mentioned, we need government activity and supranational activity as well to make a lot of those things happen in order to have those consolidated markets. We heard from Nigeria some interesting initiatives that were done to support local production, particularly if I can call it, I would imagine that being the essential medicines generic area. So the things that can be looked at in terms of preferential procurement, maybe in those types of areas, important. So although still a lot has been done, there's still a lot to do, but I think the fact that we had this discussion today, there are an increasing number of platforms, and the point there is partnerships. And then just to finalize on that question that came from Alex on partnerships, it is important that these are all developed as cross-stakeholder partnerships. And just one example, in the support for the operationalization of AMA, we have the AMATA, the African Medicines Agency, a treaty alliance set up by IAPO, the International Alliance of Patient Organization, and ourselves, and the patients have been a clear driver in the establishment and the future operationalization of AMA. I leave it there. I thank everybody for participating and everybody who joined us today. Thank you very much.
Dear participants, we are now transitioning into track 8 of the conference.
Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon, dear colleagues and distinguished guests. We have reached the final session of the 5th African Regulatory Conference. On behalf of IFPMA, I would like to thank you for being with us so far and welcome you to this final session. My name is Joanne De Crescenzo, and I lead the Regulatory Affairs EMEA Emerging Markets team in Johnson & Johnson. As such, my remit includes our work on the African continent and in the global public health sector. I will be your moderator for this first part of this final session, and I am joined later by Ms. Chimwema Chamdimba in this moderation role. So this is the last session of this 5th conference, as we said, and I am sure we are looking forward to bringing together many important aspects already discussed in these last, I would say, very successful days. In this session, we will share the African medicines regulatory harmonization progress, the work plan at continental technical committee level, and the latest developments on the operationalization of the African Medicines Agency. Additionally, we have another strong panel to discuss the establishment of a network of experts supporting AMA and how countries and regions are preparing to integrate efficiently this new regulatory ecosystem. We will start, in fact, with an update from Ms. Chimwemwe Chamdemba from Audanepat. Chim, besides being my co-moderator today, is the head of the African Medicines Regulatory Harmonization Initiative at the African Union Development Agency, and she is responsible for this program and technical support to the operationalization of AMA. This will be followed by the keynote speech from Mr. Samuel Asante Boateng from the Ghana FDA. Samuel is currently the Director of Drugs and Herbal Medicines Registration Directorate. He has been working in regulation for 18 years and has extensive experience in the ECOWAS region since its commencement in the year 2017. So with that, before I hand over to Chim, I would like to open the floor to an interactive Mentimeter poll, and I would like you to scan the QR details and answer the question. Guess how many countries have ratified the AMA Treaty to date? So I'll give you some time to have that code and to answer the question, and we will take a look at the results later on. And with that, I hand over to Chim. Dear Chim, please, you are now can open this final session. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me, and apologize. I'm at an airport, so it's going to be a bit noisy, but I'm hoping that you can still hear me. Kindly confirm.
Yes, we see you and we hear you.
Perfect.
Loud and clear. Thank you.
So much. Thank you. So I thought that probably with the way I think regulatory harmonization has been discussed in the past sessions, it will be key and critical for me to provide a comprehensive update on the regulatory harmonization, as well as where we are with the African Medicines Agency and what we are planning in terms of moving forward on the operationalization of AMA. There are quite a few developments that I think speakers before me have highlighted and have indicated when it comes to the African Medicines Agency in terms of the regulatory ecosystem on the continent that is emerging, that conducive for local manufacturing. Next slide, please. However, I wanted to really emphasize that this is the journey, because in most of the dialogues that we participate in, normally I think what is emerging is everybody believes, and I think everybody knows, that once we have AMA, our regulatory ecosystem is going to, evolve and, change for the better. But I like to think I heard John Mwangi in the last session making reference to the progress that has been made by the continent over the years, because we started this journey in 2009 on regulatory, but we were responding to the local manufacturing agenda that was set through the pharmaceutical manufacturing plan for Africa. And that is the reason that time in 2009 that regulators understood and believed that, well, we cannot do it alone. No regulatory agency in the continent has all the capacity that it requires for the regulatory ecosystem to be conducive for the continent to be attractive for investment in pharmaceutical manufacturing. So this is the reason that the African Medicines Regulatory Harmonization Initiative was born, with the view that it should foster regulatory harmonization across the continent. Of course, our desire was to harmonize across the 55 member states, ultimately, which is where we are now with the African Medicines Agency. But we understood that we needed to learn. We needed to subdivide the continent and use the existing structures then that would facilitate regulatory harmonization, which are the regional economic communities, where countries were already working together, where countries had already come together to make decisions around issues of trade, and other important aspects of the regional economic communities. So we actually built on that and say, can we harmonize in the regional economic communities so that we learn lessons over time in the regions, and then ultimately it will be easier for the continent to harmonize at the African Medicines Agency level. And we are glad that with the progress that we made over the years in the regulatory harmonization initiative, where we now have 5 regional economic communities harmonized, we have having adopted harmonized standards and regulations. We have 5 regional economic communities that have been initiated joint assessments of applications. They have initiated joint inspections of manufacturing sites, and they are dialoguing and discussing at the regional level on the emerging regulatory ecosystem. And also, I think another important thing I noted in the last session, issues around legislation and how they will hamper harmonization and working together of national regulatory authorities. We had anticipated and noted this sometime back in 2015, and this is the reason that the AU model law was developed from 2015 to 2016, adopted by the African Union, with the view that countries must use the model law as a benchmark to review their national legislation so that they are able to, they are updated and they meet international standards, but also they are able to facilitate them as countries to work across their borders, because that by the time we already noted that it is a barrier and it is a hindrance. So in 2016, the model law was adopted. Over the years, we have seen 13 countries already adopting the model law, domesticating the model law. But currently, we are supporting countries that the demand is quite high to continuously provide support on legislative issues, because understanding that AMA will not work on its own. AMA is going to require national regulatory authorities that are able to take up AMA recommendations and make decisions at the national level. So we are going through this journey, and we believe that with the adoption and coming into force of the AMA Treaty, the regulatory ecosystem on the continent is really going to be consolidated. Next slide, please. And the next one as well, so that we keep time. Yes.
Thank you, Jim.
So,
we have.
Exactly. So when it comes to the African Medicines Agency, what are we looking at? As I said, it is a journey. We started with the harmonization, and we are looking at AMA now taking up the harmonization pieces that started with the regs and anchoring on them to build harmonization across the continent. But I think I wanted to emphasize here that when it comes to AMA, it's not like AMA is going to deal with all regulatory issues across the continent. AMA has been set up to deal with specific products. In the Treaty of the AMA, Article 6, it clearly indicates that AMA will deal with complex molecules that no country alone has enough capacity, or the capacity is dispersed across the continent, and countries will benefit from working together. AMA will deal with emergencies. AMA will help us with other products that really countries will not be able to handle on their own. However, there are certain products that will still be handled at the regional economic community level, and there are certain products that will remain at the country level, because they can be handled easily at the country level. So it is an ecosystem that is going to have 3 layers. 3 layers that will anchor the continental regulatory ecosystem and attract local manufacturing on the continent. Next slide, please. So I will not talk about this because our colleagues are answering already the question related to this. We should move to the next one. So what we have done currently, we are using what we have been doing on the AMA-REGA over the years to support the operationalization of AMA. We are using the technical assets and the technical capacity that has been built over the years to build the AMA that we want, that is going to be scientifically and technically sound, and that will bring confidence or build confidence of everyone that wants to enter into the African regulatory ecosystem. So what we have done is that we have set up continental technical working groups or continental technical committees that are driving the different technical aspects that will eventually be taken up by AMA. And I wanted to highlight one important aspect of the work that we are currently doing. We have set up standards and processes at the continental level, which we have consulted with different stakeholders, and we have reached a point that they have been adopted by the regulators across the continent through the African Medicines Regulators Conference. And now we are ready to pilot the continental system. So we are getting into piloting continental joint assessment and continental joint inspections. We have already started the process, and we will be sending out very soon, maybe in the next 2-3 weeks, an expression of interest. We are glad that different manufacturers have already expressed interest, that they are willing to pressure test the systems that we have set. So the GMP, the Good Manufacturing Practice Technical Committee, as well as the Assessment Technical Committee, are going to be very fundamental in driving this process. What is important is that the pilot then is providing us with a platform to try and pressure test our system. So thank you very much for giving us this opportunity to share AMA and regulatory harmonization on the continent. And we look forward to conversations in the next few hours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chim. Thank you so much. And with that, I will go directly to Samuel Asante Boateng for his keynote speech. Do you hear us, Samuel?
Yes.
Welcome.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much.
So please go ahead. You have about 4 minutes, I guess. You should also be...
Okay. So, honorable moderators and panelists, dear participants, thank you for inviting me to share some thoughts and insights for a successful operationalization of the AMA of the African Medicine Agency AMA. Before I do this, kindly allow me to thank the organizers of this program for the inclusion of this subject in the 5th African Regulatory Conference. Allow me also to convey to you the regards and best wishes of the Chief Executive Officer of the Food and Drugs Authority Ghana, Dr. Delise Mimidako. The issues we will discuss here are really at the heart of sustainable development in Africa and beyond. As we all know, AMA is a proposed specialized agency of the African Union intended to facilitate the harmonization of medical regulation throughout the African Union, following a similar model to that of the European Medicine Agency, EMA.
Samuel, I don't mean to interrupt you, but we don't see you on the screen. Are you meaning to open your camera? I just want to notify you that we don't see you.
My camera is open.
We don't see you.
Oh. Yeah, my camera is open.
Okay, I'm not sure. There's a technical issue, but I guess we should then continue.
Joanne, I think we can continue because we are projecting the slide with Samuel's
yes, we'll do that.
Title and picture. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, at the local level, I would like to enumerate some ongoing efforts put in place to strengthen the national regulatory authorities in their preparedness to embrace AMA. Establishment and implementation, and also maintenance of quality management systems in the regulatory systems for all or some of the regulatory functions, availing the NRA regulatory systems to be assessed by WHO, and the development of implementation of a roadmap for the institutional development plan under the WHO GBT, strengthen pharmacovigilance functions in accordance with the WHO GBT, bridge gaps in marketing authorization activities with the implementation of reliance policy and risk-based approaches to ensure quality assured medical products and other health technologies on the market. Expansion of the scope of accreditation of the quality control lab to ISO 17025, and then a robust market control systems and others. Regional economic community, the rest, formed under the AMRA program, which was created through a joint initiative of NEPAD, the Pan-African Parliament, African Union Commission, in collaboration with the WHO, the World Bank, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and the UK's Department for International Development, DFID, has done a lot to ensure the successful operationalization of ARMA. Honorable moderators and panelists, dear participants, NEPAD agency has spearheaded the designation of 11 regional centers of regulatory excellence, leveraging existing academic, research, and regulatory institutions to strengthen regulatory capacities of needy NRAs within the region. With such programs in place, the operationalization of ARMA will be successful based upon the pre-existing structures of the regs and member states that have already started implementing the AMRH programs. Let us recall that ARMA is also a response to addressing challenges faced by NMRAs in Africa, such as the weak and non-coherent legislative frameworks, redundant or duplicative processes, sluggish medicine registration processes, subsequent delayed decisions, inefficient and limited technical capacity, among others. Currently, 35 of the African Union's 55 member states have now ratified the AMA Treaty, and a decision has already been reached for the establishment of the headquarters of the African Medicine Agency in Kigali, Rwanda. It is worth noting that an agreement to this effect has been concluded between Rwanda and the African Union Commission on the 10th June 2023 as part of the progress made so far. This will actually resolve the challenge of a lack of centralized submission and mandated central registration system observed in all the regs AMRH initiatives being implemented. Research conducted by various authors on the MRH initiatives implemented by the regs points out to the fact that it leads to a reduction of the workload for both applicants and assessors with a shorter timeline for approval. This is expected to improve access to the quality assured essential medicines in the region and also access to various markets at the same time. Honorable moderators and panelists, dear participants, I would like to take this opportunity to thank all our development partners, both technical and financial, including the World Bank, the European Union, the African Development Bank, NEPAD Agency, Bill and Melinda Gates, DFID, African Union Commission, WHO, and Swissmedic, who have been working side by side with the regs and their commitment to support the successful operationalization of ARMA. In order to ensure the successful operationalization of ARMA, therefore, all actors and stakeholders will require a careful look at the following best practices: transparency and reliability through the organization of joint activities, meeting the respective timelines, and the employment of information management systems to allow for trust in the system, reliance to ensure equitable use of resources, NRA capacity building, timely communication among stakeholders, cooperation at all levels, and sustainable funding. In conclusion, I look very much forward to the discussions and the future work ahead of us on the successful operationalization of ARMA to the benefit of member states in the African region and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you, Samuel. That was great, really insightful, and thank you also for pointing out some of the learnings and the journey that we have talked about until today. Before we go to our panel discussion, I would like to see if we have any results from the Mentimeter that we launched before our two introductions. So I see that you are all very well informed, and we have 93% correct answers, so that's really good. Okay, so I want to also encourage you to use the chat for any questions you have. We will be moderating some questions and answers after the panel discussion. So please feel free to also put your questions in the chat as we go along. And with that, we will what we will do is we will go straight to the panel discussion. So can I have the brief overview of our guests? Thank you very much. Yes, here we are. So I welcome today distinguished panelists. Some faces we have already met before in the previous sessions. So we have Ms. Victoria Palmireg from WHO, the International Affairs effort from excuse me, not WHO, from EMA, helping in leading the international affairs effort. We have Gabriela Zernhausen from Swiss Medic, who is also Deputy Head Stakeholder of Engagement. We have met Samuel already, Ms. Sakila Dubé, who we have already met in previous sessions as well, coordinating SADC effort. And I would also like to introduce Mr. Mohammed Ismail from WHO AFRO, leading the Medicine Supply Health Infrastructure Equipment Maintenance team. And last but not least, we have Uchenna Dezugba from Novartis, who is representing the industry and IFPMA and is heading the RA Policy and Strategic Operations team for Sub-Saharan Africa and Novartis. So welcome everybody. It's really nice to have you here. We have had a good few days this week, having a lot of insights on regulatory reliance, on getting digitally ready for the African Medicines Agency and the next steps. And of course, in this session, we are interested to see now how it all comes together finally. So I will start with some questions to the panel, and I would like to call on to Victoria first from EMA. Good afternoon, Victoria. So
hello, good afternoon.
We know that you have already experienced a lot of the challenges that an agency can face in the early stages of operationalization. So you have some experience to share with us, and maybe Africa Medicines Agency learnings can learn from this. And we would also like to hear how EMA will be supporting the progress of African Medicines Agency.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Very excited to be here and very proud to join Kim and colleagues and all our African colleagues that have started and paved the way for the African Medicines Agency long time ago. When the European Commission asked us a couple of months ago, what can EMA offer to AMA? How can we help? We decided to structure a bit our ideas and programs in three pillars. One was to support the operationalization of AMA, and we are supporting and we are ready to support and facilitate or contribute to the setup of the technical committees, to the governance, administrative and scientific processes, and this also includes the financial sustainability, and very importantly, setting up, like we did, the continental framework for cooperation and reliance, because for us, a model for cooperation among all the medicines regulators, we think that will be key to effectively supervise complex supply chains, to avoid duplication of regulatory work, to align regulatory approaches and make best use of all the resources. But at the end, what we all want is to bring medicines to patients earlier. The second pillar of our support to AMA is and will be to strengthen the scientific and regulatory expertise, and we are ready to support with different capacity building initiatives. And we want to do this in collaboration with our European training network and especially with the ARCOS that have set up, that our colleagues in the continent have set up with this regard. So working with them together to strengthen the African scientific and regulatory expertise. And also part of our work as CMA will be to coordinate and align all the European efforts, because what we want is to ensure that all the interventions of the EU stakeholders are complementary so that they can have a greater impact, that we are not all doing the same activities in the same countries. And in addition, we have to consider what activities other international partners are doing. And for this, the WHO coordination is actually key so we can maximize the impact in the continent. So that's probably what I can say on our support on the AMA progress.
Thank you, Victoria. That's fantastic. It's nice to hear words like complementary and good use of resource. Training also is very much appreciated, and of course the coordination with other international partners and support. You know, we also heard in the opening comments from Jim that the focus from at the continental level will also be on priority medicines. So again, good use of resources. Gabriela, perhaps you can also give us some insights about Swissmedic's input and Swissmedic's experience. I know that we've talked a lot about regulatory pathways and collaboration and reliance in these days, and you also have in your day-to-day remit a lot of experience, which even as a stringent regulatory authority, Swissmedic is making use of.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And thanks a lot for inviting me to this panel. It's a pleasure to be here. And yes, as you said, reliance for Swissmedic, it's a strategic objective, even though in this current period we haven't explicitly mentioned it, but we do apply a reliance on a daily basis in different areas like inspections, also through pharmaceutical inspection scheme peaks, but also in pathways for authorization of medicines and vaccines, for example. And we do, I mean, reliance, you can apply it to different extents. So it really depends. It's not just the sharing of assessment reports, but for us, it means that we can get in contact with assessors from other authorities, which may have more expertise than we have on certain topics. We can exchange knowledge, expertise, capacity, and we can, through that, come to better decision making. And we do have our standard processes, of course, as well at Swissmedic, but we try to make use of whatever other scheme we can use, such as like Access, the consortium you may have heard about, or through Orbis, the project by FDA, which focuses on oncology and other areas. So we try to exchange our views to come to make a better decision, and we don't see this as a weakness, we rather see this as a strength. And as a small agency such as Swissmedic, we basically rely on our network of authorities. And I think WHO as a technical partner now with the WLA system will help us to move further in that way. And we would certainly also recommend AMA to consider other than just the standard pathways and to make use of whatever is available. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So again, it's really nice to also hear that it's about you know, recognizing where you can learn and different areas of expertise to share. And at the end of the day, it's about the patient and access to the patient, which is also what we're discussing in today's final session, ultimately. So, Mohammed, you are with us representing WHO regional office, and it's really nice to have you here. And we've again heard a lot, we're hearing a lot about collaborative pathways and faster access to medicinal products. And in your view, what are your thoughts about how this can come together under a seamless umbrella in African Medicines Agency at continental level?
Thank you very much, and thanks to IFPMA for inviting us to speak at this meeting. Let me confirm, is the audio sounding okay?
We hear you very well, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Very pleased also to be part of this panel with some very dear colleagues that we collaborate with often, and happy to share a couple of perspectives from WHO side. So I think, when thinking about how to, improve market access to quality assured and to safe and effective medicines in Africa, one of the very prominent keywords or buzzwords that often comes up is about regulatory harmonization and about promoting reliance, promoting even recognition among the different regulatory authorities. And I think, one of the facts we have to be conscious of is the number of countries in Africa, which also some of them have relatively small markets. So it's an extremely, I think, serious limitation to some of the marketing authorization holders if they want to, go through the processes at each and every country with varying regulatory landscapes, with various capacities on what or what not they can assess. And I think all of this work that my colleagues have been talking about contribute to this common goal of making things easier in Africa on access to quality medicines. Now you have like several big groups of players. So you have the national regulatory authorities who are the key player, and then you have the regional economic communities. There are a number of partners that are supporting, and there's also the work in progress on operationalization of the African Medicines Agency. And I think the common goal is that, once AMA is up and running, that products that are going through the AMA procedure for, seeking marketing authorization advice, it would have hopefully a very much fast-tracked and expedited process within the countries once it comes to submit applications for marketing authorization within specific countries. I think similarly in the regional economic communities, countries are working very hard to try to harmonize among their regions so that products that are registered in one country can either have access or have easier access to markets in other countries. And this is, of course, to the benefit of patients and people needing the medical products, which are not just confined to medicines. We're also engaged in discussions about, of course, vaccines and medical devices and various health-related products. So I think, this is work that is still in progress. It has also, there have been a lot of milestones, but it has been a long journey. And I think not void of some challenges, some of which have been overcome, some that are still, persistent. But hopefully with the collaboration of partners and the open mindset that we're seeing in many of the heads of regulatory agencies, plus the political will and the support from the leaders in the continent, I think this work is looking very promising and coming towards some, very fruitive outcomes. I think also the decision on hosting the African Medicines Agency in Kigali was one of the big achievements, and preparations for that are ongoing from WHO side. Also, we are preparing to support as much as possible the AMA Secretariat and the technical team that is hopefully going to be recruited to work in Kigali. And we're also trying to use the WHO convening power, so to speak, to try to make sure that the stakeholders and the partners have a very comfortable and very secure environment where information can be shared and collaborations can be strengthened. And of course, we're very much engaged with ALDA-NEPAD and other agencies such as MS Swissmedic and Gates Foundation and others on an approach that we're calling Coalition of Interested Parties, which tries to align and facilitate collaboration among the different stakeholders. So I think I'll pause there and thank you very much. Over to you, Joanne.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your contribution. And it's very it's amazing, you know, what is going on and what we are accomplishing in this journey. So I would like to turn my next question to Sakila, who we have already heard, you know, in previous sessions, giving us some insights from the experience with SADC and with Zazibona. And we know, you know, it's a perfect segue to what we have already discussed in these first few minutes on the challenges at national level regarding adoption of regional recommendations. May I ask what SADC is planning to do to ensure a smooth uptake of regional decisions? And what is your vision about joint assessment procedures and AMA assessments and how they could complement each other? I heard in one of the sessions earlier this week you were mentioning pilots, so maybe, yeah, you can.
Okay. Thanks, Joanna, and thank you for the privilege to actually share something that we're very excited about right now. So, as you're well aware, 10 years have gone by. We've had our, you know, like proof of concept. And so now we're actually moving into a phase where we are going into the effectiveness and the efficiency. And so this is what this upcoming pilot is going to be all about. So the key thing that you mentioned was the recommendations. First of all, we listened to our clients. They were not happy that it ends with a recommendation. So it's something useful, but then after a while, people were questioning the credibility of the system. So when the heads met in June, they then agreed that we would now set up a firmer reliance on those recommendations. So the commitment to finalize them in 90 days has not changed. It's always been there, but we were actually not 100% meeting it. So you'd have one country achieving it and another country not doing so. So in the end, your whole target of multiple entry at simultaneous entry is then defeated. So what we have now done is we're going to move away, let me not say take away, we're going to move the process away from country level, because country level is very inundated with all sorts of applications and not necessarily the ones that are for joint assessment. So Central Point is going to assist by turning this more into like a certification scheme. So whilst before we required it to be supportive of joint and work sharing, we now are saying you don't necessarily have to apply in the individual member states. Come to Zazibona, get your recommendation. Once you're holding your paper in your hand, Zazibona then says go to the country, whichever one, and you're going to have that recommendation valid for a year. Year being premised on the fact that we hope that you will not have a lot of post-approval changes within that 1 year. So coming to the crux of the matter, what's going to be different now with that recommendation? So as we speak, the countries are in the process of redefining and mapping their processes. So they've got existing processes, but now they're actually looking at them in depth to say, where have our challenges been? And so within this coming month, we will then publish so that you're clear about what is remaining in each and every country when you get there for the recommendation. We have 1 or 2 countries that do have challenges because of their legislation, in the sense that there's still some technical things caught up there. But the whole idea is that we are hoping maybe waivers. I don't want to preempt what the countries are going to be able to achieve. And then the next point about how the joint assessment sessions are then going to feed into the whole continental. So your REC is really the building block for both the connection between country and the continental. The way it's being mapped out is such that the profile or the scope of products should not actually overlap. So regional is going to particularly be taking care of your not so complicated molecules, but which have a multiplicity of national interests, but they must have a wide public health perspective. Otherwise, you're then doing work on behalf of individual countries, which is not the idea. So it's still sharing of the work, but doing the certification first. Once you're armed with your certification, you then go ahead to the countries that you want to register your product. In the pilot, we will see where our bottlenecks still stand, and then we'll be committed to actually resolving them. I hope that excites you a little bit.
It does very much. Thank you. It seems that you, like you said, you're listening to your stakeholders. You're taking action to improve continuously, and in efficiency in the process itself. You know, with this regional recommendation that then can be used in a further collaborative procedure. And it's also very good to hear, you know, very clear remit or at least scope direction in what a REC would be doing and what the overall AMA expertise would be focusing on, which is really a very good distribution of expertise and resource in the end. So my next question would be back to my co-moderator, Chim. So we've heard a lot now from the regulators, I guess, but as Auda NEPAD, what would you expect the industry, us, the innovative industry, role to be? How can we, pharmaceutical industry, academia, also patients, support with this operationalization of the African Medicines Agency, in your views?
Yes, thank you for that question, my co-moderator. I think one thing that I wanted to start with is to say that AMA will only be successful, or even continental and regional processes will only be successful if the industry participates. Because who brings products on the market? It is the industry. And it is the willingness of the industry to pressure test our systems, to try our systems, to be available, to participate in the processes that we are setting up at the regional and continental level. And I wanted to also indicate that at the end of the day, we talked about the pilots that we want to start. For instance, we are starting actually this month. It will only be successful if the industry is willing to participate and be part of the pilot. So we really look forward to the industry being willing to pressure test what we are setting up at the continental level and having confidence in the system, because it is only when we try and we pilot that we will learn lessons and bring in the efficiencies that we need to bring into the system. Sakile has just talked about how the process has been evolving with Zazibona over the last 10 years. It will be the same process even with the African Medicines Agency, so that when we learn, we feed back into the system. The next thing that I wanted to also talk about is that as we develop processes, as we develop systems, we will need feedback and we will need to engage a stakeholder. So to us, industry is a very important stakeholder because it is the user of the processes that we are setting up. When we were putting together the list of priority products for the continental assessment, we really saw very good feedback from the industry, and we really would like to thank the industry because most of the feedback that we received in that document, in that guidance document on priority products, came from the industry. So we want us to have a two-way process, a two-way platform where we receive your feedback in a very corrective way or in a very informative way that informs the systems that are being set up, but also as we try the systems, you being willing as industry to participate and to be part of the processes that are being put in place. I also wanted to indicate that from our perspective, we want to be as transparent as possible and as responsive as possible. And we can only do that if we maintain this two-way communication. I also would like to take this opportunity to indicate that as the entities that are driving the AMA operationalization process, we are putting together a framework for engaging the industry. And we are going to be consulting with the industry on the framework itself to see if it really establishes that platform. We want to have a continuous platform where we receive feedback, we improve processes, and we try them out together, and we receive feedback and improve again, so that it's a continuous learning process that will improve efficiencies of the system and hence impact on public health of the continent. Let me stop there, my co-moderator. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's really nice to hear this openness to receive feedback as well in such a concrete manner. Uchenna, would you like to comment on what is your expectation as being part of the industry, and what is your role to play here?
No, thanks a lot for that question. A lot of things have been said, and our expectations for AMA really is for a modern regulatory system within our continent, right, that will enable access for patients in Africa, that will support, regulatory system strengthening with clear roles and responsibilities at the national, regional, and continental levels, which I'm hearing from all the stakeholders that this is already being considered and put in place. We also expect AMA to complement the AMRH initiatives with clear mechanisms that will enable quick and transparent translation of any recommendation from AMA into regulatory decisions at the national level. Of course, we're looking forward to the improvement of interagency collaboration, the joint reviews and inspection pathways that will really minimize the burden of work and duplication, establishment of these centers of excellence, and really making sure that they stay focused and implemented. And I'm not going to even talk about how we're really looking forward to improved adoption of reliance and harmonization of regulatory processes as well as guidances that are aligned with the global standards, because this will help us with scientific evidence-based decision making that will then lead us to accelerated, transparent, streamlined, and predictable review processes, and not just at NDA level, but throughout the life cycle of the product. With respect to clinical oversight, we're really looking forward to the strengthening of the oversight and conduct of clinical research in Africa and the adherence to one global standard, which is the ICH GCP. Obviously, when you look at Africa, we have porous borders. So we are also looking for that improvement in health security, where we have enhanced market surveillance across borders to combat exposure of patients to falsified and substandard products. And just generally, an adoption of digital and technology solutions. As an industry, what is our role? It really ties in very perfectly with what Chimwenwe has been saying, right? As an industry, we really do have extensive practical experience from licensing our medicines with regulatory agencies all around the world, and we are always happy to share this experience. We will continue to advocate for the ratification of the AMA Treaty by the remaining countries, to maximize the potential of AMA as it's being operationalized. We continue to advocate for harmonization of all regulatory activities, and we'll continue to showcase all the success stories from around the world, including Africa. We heard from Sakile, great things are happening even within Africa when we look at all the regional economic communities. And we are very happy, Chimwenwe, to participate in these new regulatory pathways. We always recommend pilots to pressure test these solutions, and we're very happy to participate in those pilots to make sure that we maintain that feedback. So we'll share the feedback as well. What is working well? Where do we need to improve? And that is very important. Through our engagement in the AMRH focus areas and technical committees, we're also contributing to the regulatory reforms at the country, regional, and continental levels to inspire the development of these regulatory systems guidance documents that are aligned with global standards. Just like Chimwenwe said, we were very heavily involved in commenting in the guideline for priority products at continental level assessment. So thank you. I'm really looking forward to it.
Excellent. Thank you, Chena. I think you've nicely summarized everything that industry would like to say in a very nice manner. I believe we're out of time. I would have liked to have a second round with our panelists here, but I also want to give the chance to answer some questions as well. In the meantime, can we have the second Mentimeter question so that we can keep our participants engaged and active? It's Friday afternoon, so we're coming to the end of a very nice week. So please scan the QR code. I would like you to write into this poll. Can you share one key focus area to be prioritized if you want to make AMA successful? So this would be our question for you, and we will start seeing the responses as a word cloud. And then I would like to pass over to Chim so that we can take some questions from the audience.
Thank you so much. So as I think it has been an interesting discussion, and I think we have received a lot of information, but I'm sure there are a lot of questions that the participants may have. But let me start with going to, I'm seeing there are quite a number of questions also that have been put in the Q&A section. There's a question that is coming from, of course, an anonymous attendee. It is asking about SADC. So I'm sure this goes to Sakile, or on what is being done in SADC and in future for AMA to harmonize labeling requirements and access control measures in the region. So if you can respond to that question, Sakile, over to you.
Oh. Yeah, no, so this one is a very sticky one for us because we, corporately with industry, we came up with a guideline, and that guideline is actually already approved and endorsed by both industry and ourselves. Where it becomes a challenge is that some of those things are actually in people's legislation. And so probably maybe when we think about how to work together with industry, one of the key things maybe would be for industry to make a lot of noise about this in terms of the legislations, because we are all in agreement, but as long as the national legislations have not changed, and these things are not a priority to most parliaments, etc., so we kind of are stuck. And so the only thing that maybe we would be looking towards are waivers, but then it does become a challenge if it's stuck in a legislative thing. So we have a guideline. We are committed to the guideline, but our headache now is the fact that legislative changes are taking way too long. And to be honest, I don't want to give people false hopes, but that is where we are stuck right now.
Thank you, Sakile, for responding to that. There's also another question that goes to you, Sakile, on what you mean. I think somebody is appreciating the presentation that you made, or the submission that you made in the panel, and is asking what is meant by directly applying to Zazibona for the recommendation before applying to individual countries. Does this mean that the process will be digitalized and one NRIA will be chosen as a focal point for Zazibona? So if you can also respond to that.
Sure. So the level of digitalization is not going to be able to accommodate eCTD, mainly because only South Africa, amongst the 16 member states, has the capacity and capability to do eCTD submissions. So we will still be taking CTD format, but really in a searchable PDF form. So what it means is that an expression of interest will then be published, and in that expression of interest, there will be information as to how to approach Zazibona. So there would be an email as well as a system that is actually almost close to being finalized that will be able to accept dossiers at that level. So this, I think I need to stress the fact that being a voluntary mechanism, it's pre-submission to a member state. So our implementing agency and coordinating agency still remains the Medicines Control Authority of Zimbabwe. So they would have the oversight through their through the regional coordinator, whom most of you would know, Farai, as well as for inspections, we have SLI, who actually look into the technical side of coordination. But in terms of the day-to-day now, literally there would be, the back office would be myself and 2 or 3 other people, but in conjunction with the NMRAs. So we want to have a secure portal where you submit your dossier, and then it is going to now be given to an expert within the region who would do the primary review, and then the second review would then still be done by someone within an agency. Then they would come together for the plenary as Zazibona has been working. So the primary change really is about not actually having to apply to country X and country Y and then waiting for the two countries to bring you forward in the pipeline. Immediately, once your application comes through, within a 15-day timeline, it will be screened and then it will be evaluated. What the centralization will also do is allow us to be able to start and stop the clock, because that's one thing we've not been able to do. So we've not been able to account for industry time. So during the time when the queries are with you, we will stop the clock and then be able to restart it. It probably might not have fully answered you, but I hope it does give a level of understanding.
Thank you. Thank you very much for those responses, Sakile. I think those are the only questions that were directed to you. The other things that I'm seeing here are comments, and I think they're quite informative from Benjamin Botwe, I think, about advocacy, focusing on attitudinal change when it comes to using innovative approaches, when it comes to regulation, that we need to invest on that. And also Alex here has a comment, which mainly is also focusing on ensuring that we have patient engagement, more patient involvement in planning, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation and learning. So these are the questions and the comments that we had in the chat, but unless if there's any other hands, we would like to go to the Mentimeter and see the responses to the question that was raised.
So we can see here we've got reliance and work sharing, convergence, technology, of course, CTA, harmonization. Harmonization is coming up quite strong. There's a lot of different words here and some that we have already seen in these few days, but I guess harmonization comes up quite strong, and reliance is coming up in a second way. I like very much the comment from Uchina before about it being modern as well, right? I think that was also a key word here.
Yes, and I'm also seeing the partner coordination, which is, I think, one of the key things that we really need to achieve. Otherwise, duplication of efforts impacts progress. So I think there's also patient involvement that has just been put in the comment as well, and building trust. I think trust is very important. Trust between the regulatory authorities, the regulators, trust between the regulatory authorities and the industry, trust between the regulatory authorities and the patients and the consumers of the product. So this is quite key. The issue of technology has also been highlighted here, that the use of technology as well as legal reforms, quite important inputs in terms of how we move forward, how stakeholders are looking at us moving forward.
Maybe we can ask our panelists also which would be the one word for the final round.
Yes, we can do that. You can moderate that so that you can call the panelists.
Yes, I understand. Thank you. I understand your challenge of being in an airport. Victoria, would you like to give us your one word? Oh, you are muted, Victoria.
Can you hear me now? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. So for me, harmonization is actually quite...
Okay, harmonization. Mohammed? Oh, Victoria, we don't hear you. Yeah, Victoria has some issues with the microphone, it seems. Mohammed, please, sorry I interrupted you.
Not at all. I think I would emphasize partner coordination at this phase.
Thank you. Gabriela?
Yeah, very good. Summary of everything I wanted to summarize in my final minute I have. So I think all of that is important, and altogether it gives then, like as you said before, this modern framework of collaboration. What I didn't mention before is the harmonization of guidelines, and to be part of international initiatives such as ICH and others to have the same standards, because this is kind of the baseline for all collaboration in the end. So I cannot just focus on one term.
Yes, it's difficult to choose, and I can see that Victoria is nodding about harmonization of guidance as well. Uchenna, would you like to give it a go?
It's difficult to choose, to be honest, but harmonization, reliance, and engagement, partner coordination is really key, as well as that clear commitment from participating NREs to implement the assessments quickly and efficiently at the national level. Thank you.
Thank you. And Zakile, would you like to give some final comments on this focus areas?
Sure. The one thing that I've actually seen is that key is actually the convergence, because we've called our initiative harmonization, but harmony is about togetherness. Convergence is really about what everyone's been talking about, the issue of, are the guidelines exactly the same? Will they converge? Will it bring you to the central point? And so this is where the whole crux of the matter is that, yes, we want to be harmonized, but essentially there has to be convergence. Otherwise, that harmonization is not going to take us any further. So I love everything that's been put on there. And for me, I'm saying that convergence and that national legal reform.
It's a very important point.
About AU model law, but we really need to work now on the legislation. Yeah. Otherwise, we won't actually make any progress. Then, of course, just parting, I would like to cheat and say, adding another word, efficiency.
Good one.
Because that's the bottom line. Industry wants patients to have medicines, but then it is about making money. So efficiency on both our sides. And we like to be efficient because it means that patients will get what they need. Over and out.
Well said. Thank you. Before Jim handing over to you for key takeaways, there is actually one question I noticed in the chat box, which is addressed to you, and it is quite a nice one. So I want to take advantage of last few minutes to ask it to you, Jim. So could you share 2 or 3 priority areas that AMA would focus on to ensure future pandemic preparedness? I don't know how quickly you can summarize this big topic. So yeah, maybe that's a nice segue into the key takeaways as well.
Yes, yes. No, thank you so much. I'll quickly in a minute, because as you're saying, it's a huge topic, and we are in the process of really looking at where does AMA start from, and those are the discussions that we're really having. And we know what we went through and countries went through during the COVID time, and some countries were not even able to put products on the market quite quickly because they did not have legislative clauses to allow them to do that. So in terms of priorities of the African Medicines Agency, the immediate priorities, for now I told you that we are piloting the joint assessment and joint inspections. We are hoping that if this succeeds, AMA definitely is going to have a system that will be called upon at any point in time when there's an outbreak, an emergency to respond to. We want to put in place a mechanism that joint regulatory work that is supposed to be done at the continental level is done in a very efficient way, as Zakile talked about, and we are able to pull experts in a very quick manner to be able to respond to emergencies. But as you're saying, it's a huge topic, and I think we can even set up a webinar on it and ensure that we have key strategic activities for AMA put in place from the word go to be able to respond to emergencies quickly.
Thank you. Okay,
So I can proceed with the takeaways, my co-moderator. Yes.
Yes, please do. Thank you. It was a nice session.
Yes. Thank you.
Successful again.
Yes, and thank you very much. It was really a pleasure co-moderating with you. I know you have done the biggest part of it because of my situation, but we have managed, and it has been a very informative session. Quite a few things have come out, and I can't even dare to summarize all of them. But I think of importance that has come out is engagement of stakeholders and ensuring that AMA is quite open, transparent, responsive when it comes to its interventions. And I think as we are setting up AMA and building on the regulatory harmonization in the regs, as well as in the at the continental level, we need to ensure that we put in place systems and processes that will ensure transparency as well as reliability through the joint activities that will be done at both levels, at the regional and at the continental level. But I think just in the Mentimeter results, we have even seen how important reliance is. That for us to be successful, we need to strengthen reliance. For countries to be able to rely on AMA decisions, but also to rely on other regulatory authorities out of the continent that are mature and they can be able to rely on their regulatory decisions. The other thing that also came out clearly is the issue around ensuring that we harmonize policies. And I think here we can also inject the issue of legislation because it came out quite high that countries need to have legislative frameworks that will enable them to effectively regulate as well as to be able to work with each other and to make decisions even in emergencies. They need to have legislative provisions that will enable them to do that. So I think this is something that really has come out, and we will ensure that we take it forward. But also importantly, capacity building, capacity strengthening of the national regulatory authorities, because we know that AMA will depend on the national regulatory authorities, and strengthening the regional centers of excellence to be able to provide sustainable capacity strengthening or capacity building for the regulators across the continent, because AMA will require well-capacitated NRIs, but also experts for them to be able to support AMA function, pooling of expertise across the continent to undertake scientific work of AMA will require strengthening of capacity. Also, issues around timely communication, stakeholder engagement have been highlighted, and also importantly, issues around cooperation at all levels, partnerships, coordination, sharing of responsibilities clearly, and collective impacts. That can only come if we cooperate and if we coordinate our efforts and collaborate better. And also, I think issues around digital technology as well as digital solutions that needs to be explored, and that AMA needs to be anchored on that. There was a question to Zazibona as well that was going towards that. Are we digitalizing our processes? What are we doing? We have, at the continental level, we are developing a RIMS, Regulator Information Management System, that we are going to be working with the regs to ensure that they are interlinked with the reg systems that are being developed, but also the national system, so that information flow is seamless. We are able to be we are able to be efficient because digital technologies bring a lot of benefits in the regulatory processes. And I think most importantly, issues around sustainability. We heard, I think, Victoria, that one of the things that we are doing with the European Medicines Agency is to look at the sustainable funding models. How can AMA learn from the systems that have worked in the other continents, the European Medicines Agency? So this is an important aspect that we need to factor in as we move forward. And I think importantly, when we are talking about sustainability, it's not just at the continental level, it is also sustainability of the regional harmonization efforts, because the regs will still be fundamental and important when it comes to harmonization in the regions, but also supporting AMA activities. So it has been a very good session with very important takeaways, which I think moving forward are going to be of benefits in shaping what the continental regulatory ecosystem is going to look like in the near future. And also, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the panelists who are very informative, and I think we learned a lot, and we really look forward to further engagement, as well as the participants. Your questions, your comments have been very constructive. They will help us to shape the future of the African Medicines Agency. So let me hand over to my co-moderator to finish off. Thank you.
Thank you, Chim. Thank you so much. And thank you for being with us even whilst traveling. Very much appreciated. I believe next on the agenda, we have some closing remarks by Jackie, who is here on behalf of IFPMA and is co-chairing the Africa Regulatory Network. So over to you, Jackie.
Thank you so much, Joanne. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, depending on where you're dialing in from. My name is Jacqueline Akpa, and I work within the Global Regulatory Affairs Organization of Johnson & Johnson, providing regulatory strategy support for global public health vaccines activities. And like Joanne mentioned, I also co-chair the Africa Regulatory Network of the IFPMA. For those of you who are new to the network, the ARN is under the umbrella of the IFPMA and provides valuable inputs into ongoing discussions, as we have seen, on regulatory system strengthening in Africa. So thank you so much for staying with us for the last 4 days of this virtual 5th Africa Regulatory Conference. The conference was organized by IFPMA in collaboration with AREPI in Ghana, IPASA in South Africa, CAPI in Kenya, LEM in France, and LIPA in the Francophone countries. A distinguished program committee comprising industry, WHO, the Gates Foundation, AUD and NEPAD, regulators and consultants from across the continent helped in shaping the conference. And indeed, the 5th Africa Regulatory Conference within the last 4 days have brought together stakeholders across the divide of the regulatory ecosystem together for patients. The discussion started with how to navigate the maze and simplify the path to efficient national registrations, as well as how to optimize the ecosystem for efficient conduct of clinical trials in the future. We touched on the various regulatory harmonization and joint assessment procedures on the continent and the basis for collaboration. We highlighted that work sharing and the use of reliance led to more efficient use of resources, as well as faster product registrations. And they had generally shorter timelines, also were more predictable appointment and assessment meetings, as well as flexibility to assess products. It was also highlighted that there was the need for a consistent and, like Chim mentioned just a few seconds ago, a more sustainable approach for regional procedures, with provisions in official guidance of the national regulatory authorities, especially for the national implementation step. We were also reminded that when it came to clinical trials, the importance of clinical trial infrastructure to both pandemic preparedness and boosting R&D capacity in Africa cannot be overlooked. Indeed, the number of clinical trials in Africa has increased from less than 100 in 2003 to more than 2,500 in 2021. It looks like a big jump, but this is, if you think about it, it's also just under 2 decades, so 2 whole decades to achieve 2,500 trials in Africa. And so clearly there's an opportunity to continue to grow the clinical trial and research ecosystem in Africa, including capacity building and ethics and regulatory oversight. In day 2, we talked about how regulatory collaboration can have a potentiated patient-centric impact, focusing on lessons learned from reliance and how best to optimize regulatory frameworks for the management of post-approval changes, all in the interest of the patient. We were reminded that reliance is the 21st century regulatory tool to benefit patients and protect the public health, and that regular exchange between regulators and industry is valuable to capture learnings and fine-tune operations. Indeed, the use of reliance can be beneficial throughout the life cycle of a product, and not just for the initial registration of the product. It was also highlighted that international standards are key to harmonize and converge. And WHO has worked on development of useful guidance on post-approval changes that can be adopted. Alignment with WHO standards will drive convergence and facilitate reliance. In day 3, we looked at innovation. You see, the arrogance of success is to think that what you did yesterday will be sufficient for tomorrow. We have seen some successes with the use of digital tools on the continent, but how do we innovate? Innovation is to imagine the future and then to simply fill in the gaps. What we choose to fill in the gaps of digital transformation with in a future together for patients. There has been great progress on digitalization on the continent with projects well underway at the national, at the NRA level, the REC, and then the continental levels as well, to advance digital innovations and ECTD deployments. While at it, there is no need to reinvent the wheel, but rather to broaden the best practices across the continent by actively supporting the AMRH's endeavors for a centralized regulatory information management system and ECTD through the African Medicines Agency. The good news is that AMA has the opportunity, and we have seen today Swissmedic and EMA, so clearly AMA has the opportunity to leapfrog to the most modern solutions, avoiding some of the pitfalls, outdated and siloed technologies that other agencies previously experienced. We also talked about regulatory agilities, where we highlighted that initially the primary goal of regulatory agilities was to ensure rapid access to safe and effective products to combat the pandemic. There's, however, an opportunity to review and incorporate agilities within normal regulatory processes to promote innovation and advancement in regulatory systems. Use of reliance, digitalization, e-tools, e-documentation, and collaborative hybrid virtual inspections stood out as areas for implementation and growth. The bottom line of all we do as stakeholders is in the interest of the patient. And today, which happens to be day 4 and the final day of the conference, we have also heard firsthand from patients on why strong regulatory systems are important for patients. We identified that increased local production would assist in ensuring more equitable access to medicines in Africa. We also looked lastly at the African Medicines Agency and the new public order for creating a sustainable ecosystem, and discussed the fact that all actors and stakeholders need to come on board to facilitate transparency and reliability. Also, reliance, harmonization of regulatory processes, NRA capacity building via our course, adoption of digital and technological solutions, as well as sustainable funding mechanisms, and of course, cooperation and collaboration on all levels is key. Just a kind reminder that the conference after today would have 2 satellite sessions, one on September 18th, and then the other on 23rd October on pharmacovigilance and how the regulatory landscape on biosimilars can be navigated respectively. So please feel free to register and join in those sessions as well. Also, the videos for the conference will be available online, and we'll be reaching out to participants in due course with the links. On behalf of the entire Africa Regulatory Network, and I would have you know that this comprises a lot of companies, so many companies are on board. I'd like to thank you, to thank the Multi-Stakeholder Program Committee for their great work in shaping the format of the conference. Also, a special thanks goes to the team at IFPME. I know that this week has not been easy on you, but thank you for ensuring all the logistical and administrative support for the smooth running of the conference. A big thank you to all our speakers, moderators, and panelists for such insightful deliberations. And of course to you, how could I leave you out, for enriching the discussions with your comments, questions, and insights throughout the chats. While we are doing this conference virtually, I would dare say that we are on virtual Africa soil, if there is anything such as that. And if there is anything Africa is known for, it is for its rich culture. And so I cannot close the conference without leaving you with 2 mementos from Africa. So here goes two proverbs. A family is like a forest. When you're outside, it's dense. And when you're inside, you see that each tree has its place. Now, the second one is this, don't forget it. If you want to go fast, you go alone. But if you want to go far, you go together. Though the work ahead looks dense, every stakeholder in the regulatory ecosystem has its place. And as we continue to take our rightful places and continue to dialogue amongst ourselves and work together, we will travel a very far distance in attaining universal health coverage, all in the interest of the patient. Now, while speed is important in transforming the regulatory ecosystem, sustainability is essential, and we can only achieve that by working together. So until the next conference, let's keep working together for patients, transforming the regulatory ecosystem in Africa. Thank you so much.